Today I'm going to show you how to rank in Google's AI mode and ChatGPT. And yes, classic SEO still matters, but ranking a brand in AI generated responses requires you to master new variables that didn't matter before. And for this training, I picked a random personal injury lawyer to show you how AI search optimization actually works. Also, check the pinned comment below to see how you can get access to my new free AI SEO and geo checklist. Let's get right into it.
First thing I want to look at is in the local pack very specifically. And you can see there's already some problems here. So first, when we look at Steinberg, you can see they're absolutely crushing it. They have 487 reviews, which is double, triple the next best competitor, okay? And you can see the top three, there's a couple things going on here. We've got the proper category, which is personal injury attorney. We can see the website that we're working on, the law firm that we're helping here, they do not have the proper category. So just a quick category switch could probably give them a nice lift. We're talking 5, maybe 10 spots in the local pack just by switching category. It is that important. Aside from that though, they've actually got a really good address. They're actually in Goose Creek, so they're really solid on that. And their phone number aligns with that location. Okay, so you can see every single one of these top three is actually located in Goose Creek, and they have that 843 number. So when you're comparing performance here, the only significant gap we're seeing, at least in the local pack, is this review gap. Okay, so 87 reviews doesn't even match the third best competitor, let alone the top one. Okay, so when we see a competitor that has nearly 500 reviews, we've got some work to do. Okay, and that's the only way that you're going to be able to catch them, is you have to narrow that review gap. It's so critical on the local level. And then we want to talk about the traditional SERPs. And as you can tell, once again, Steinberg is crushing it in the local SERPs. Okay, they're ranking really well. And this is something that's a very different than before. Like your standard SEO used to be all about ranking here. It was a good thing. But there's kind of a different reason for ranking in the SERPs now. It used to be for traffic. Okay, that used to be the good thing. You'd rank and you'd get clicks and you'd get organic traffic and you would make money. Not really the case anymore. People are clicking a lot less, and Google has deprioritized these SERPs. Like they're getting harder to find when you go to Google, because Google has now front loaded the AI mode, and that's what it wants people to use, right? And even in the case of local, you're still going, those results are going to get pushed down by the local pack anyway, and a bunch of other SERP features. But what's really important is understanding this highly technical term that I promise is not that technical, okay? The reason why we need to still show up here, even though we may not be getting a lot of clicks or traffic, is because of this retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short, okay? And essentially what this is when we go into ChatGPT or any of these LLMs, and you run a search, and you'll see that sometimes it will not go to the web to get information. Sometimes it will just give you an answer directly, because there's two things that happen when you use ChatGPT. When you run that query, it's either going to go to the static training information. So whatever it was trained on at that cutoff date, and if it knows the answer, it's going to go there. And if it already knows, it's going to give you an answer. Okay. If it doesn't know the answer, it's going to go to the web. It's going to retrieve some sources. It's going to come back, and then it's going to give you this augmented response with all this context from live results. Okay. That's why it's so important, because typically when it goes to the internet, it's going to search first, right? So it's going to go to Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo or whatever it may be. And it's going to look at the top ranking results a lot of the time. And it's going to use those results to generate that response to the user. Okay. So this is the main reason why classic SEO is still really critical, because you still need to rank really well so that then you can ultimately influence the answers that are generated inside these AI platforms. Okay, that's the main reason. Now, you'll see here, this is something that I highly recommend doing. Okay, so you can tell when we look at this particular keyword here, which is personal injury lawyer in Goose Creek, that is a very old school type of search query. This is not the way people search, based on my experience, based on what I know so far. This is not the way people search. Even anecdotally, I don't search like this inside of ChatGPT. Okay, it's much longer, multiple sentences, sometimes a whole paragraph. Sometimes I'm doing the voice and it's like a dissertation. Very different behavior going on. And that's why when we start to analyze the other AI platforms, we can't just throw one of this traditional query that we're used to into there and think that that's the way people search. It's not likely. So what you want to do is you want to convert that specific seed into something that's much more realistic that someone might use in conversational search. So this is an example from Claude. I actually really like using Claude to create these. These are really what you would call a synthetic query. Okay. So basically you go and you convert it to a realistic query that someone might use. So you can see, personal injury lawyer in Goose Creek gets converted to, I need help finding a personal injury lawyer in Goose Creek, South Carolina. Okay. That's still a little robotic. One that seems a little more natural though would be one kind of like this. I was in an accident, need a personal injury lawyer in Goose Creek area. Okay. That's much more realistic. And you can see even gets a little more contextual, even in some cases. But the point is, you want to grab one of these. And if you're going to go and benchmark your performance in ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, you need to use one of these more realistic types of queries that are much more conversational. Okay. So here's an example of me running this through Google's AI mode. Okay. As I mentioned, I showed you the web earlier. This is, web results. Now check this out. In the actual navigation here, Google doesn't even show web results anymore. It's actually buried here in the more section. So to even get to the web results, you have to click the drop down, then go to the web results, and you've got your blue links, right? And the truth is no one's going there. Okay, let's just be honest here. No one's clicking there. No one's going to use that. And so what we need to focus on is appearing in this generated answer. So you'll see some people saying, oh, well, we should do, AEO, which is answer engine optimization, so we can get this citation here. Citations are just one piece of the equation. And truthfully, most people are not going to click through on these citations because they're already getting the answer that they need. So the citations here that's not a good goal. That should be a major last secondary goal. The primary goal at this point for optimizing for AI search is to get the brand mentioned in this actual response. So once again, we can see Steinberg Law Firm here, and I'll tell you some of the things they're doing to be here. But this is once again proving that the type of query that you want to use when you run these searches. Okay, so in AI mode, you can see I used a much longer query to ultimately see what those results would end up being. Truthfully, you probably could have run the shorter one and the results probably would have been pretty similar, but just to get a more realistic picture of, how people actually search to get, just a better idea. Okay. And then the same thing here, I gave a much longer one to see the AI overview. Once again, same thing. We've got the Steinberg Law Firm, and this one's even more extreme because we see Google's actually referencing its own products. So the Google business profiles are being mentioned here. Once again, proving that if you want to do well on local in the AI products within Google, which is simply Google's AI mode and in the AI overviews, you just need to have a really good Google business profile. That's it, right? So, all the stuff that I described earlier, that's going to be that's probably like 90% of the performance that you'll see in the generated response, either here in AI mode or in the AI overview. Okay. So your Google business profile on local has become even more important. It's always been important, but it's even more important now. Okay. So I want to talk about how Steinberg is doing so well, and specifically with the Google business profile. Okay. So check this out. So first things first is they have a perfect address. Okay. So not only are they on Goose Creek Boulevard, but they're actually located in the Goose Creek city as well. You could not draw up a better address for Google business profile. It's absolutely perfect. They've got the 843 area code, which is also perfect, and a personal injury attorney category. This is, you can't do better than this. This is as good as it gets. Okay. Then they've got 335 more reviews than the next competitor. Okay. That they're crushing them. So, if you wanted to compete with them, you need to come with that same level of velocity with review generation. Okay. And the other one that's really important is in the description. Okay. I really like a lot of the things that they're doing here. It's pretty aggressive with the kind of entity injection, in other words, keyword injection. But there's a lot of things that here are actually really, really smart. So I want to kind of highlight this. So one thing that's really important with the AI platforms is understanding entities. Okay. And an entity is a person, place, or thing, or even just a topic like personal injury lawyer, which I guess is a thing. But you can see here that I've highlighted the different entities and these associations. you want to start to associate your entity with these relevant ideas. So on the local level, it's very obvious. We want Steinberg Law Firm to be associated with personal injury lawyers, that thing, but also specifically in the area, Goose Creek, South Carolina. Okay. So you can see these different entities working together, which creates a picture of relevance. Okay. And so you have to deliberately do this. This is really, really important. And you can't just do it, in your blog posts. You got to do it in all your descriptions, across all your directory listings, in your press releases. There's all kinds of opportunities to kind of shape this entity association. Okay. And then you add in the secondary topics, car accident lawyer, truck accident lawyer, XYZ. Okay. And you can see how this all starts to connect and build really, really good relevance, which, to no surprise, they do really, really well in the AI platforms as well, because they've done a really good job of associating their entity with these topics, along with the other variables we're talking about. And then the micro variables on the local level, they're not linking directly to their homepage. They're linking to that Goose Creek page. Okay. So the Goose Creek, Google business profile is linking to the Goose Creek landing page. They respond to every review. As I mentioned, they inject relevant entities. Be careful. Okay. You can be too aggressive here. So just be easy. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but just make sure you're not going too crazy. Like, they do mention Goose Creek, 3 times in the description. The AI NLP, extraction, the NLP is what the AI platforms use to understand this text. They probably don't need that much, information to understand, right? You don't need to keep slamming the same thing multiple times. It's probably good enough to understand just after one instance. Okay. And 95 years in business, they've got 52 images and videos. They post 2 to 4 posts per month on the Google business profile. They label themselves open 24 hours, and they're linking out to their 4 primary social media profiles. And so on the homepage or on the website, you use that same as schema, so that then you can once again get that entity association, right? Steinberg Law Firm is associated with the Facebook page and the Instagram and, whatever it is. Okay. So you can see this, what they're doing is really, really tight as far as entities and as far as entity association. So this is like perfect. Okay. They're doing a really, really good job. And this is what you want to model if you want to do a good job as well. Okay. And just to kind of reemphasize this point a little bit more, you can just see the domination that's going on here. We can see this is ChatGPT. We can see this is Grok once again. And you can see I'm using that long query, and they're just crushing it across the board. And there's more reasons than just the Google business profile and the reviews, which I'll share here in a second. Once again, here we go. This is Perplexity, and then this is Claude. Okay, so they're right here, highest rated. You can see that specifically. And then also here in Perplexity, they're number 1. Okay, so very, very important. And this is the byproduct of all of that work that they've been doing with review generation and really trying to fortify their reputation and sentiment. Okay. And finally, the next thing you want to be thinking about is how do you reverse engineer this? Okay. So when you see that someone's crushing it, how are they doing it? Well, the good news, the AI platforms kind of tell you what they're doing. And you can go and just look at the citations. Now, this is the part that's really important. I mentioned earlier that there's some people saying like, oh, the goal of doing all this GEO or AEO is, to get in the citations. I actually don't really agree with that. I don't think people are going to click on citations. And in fact, what you're seeing over here on the right-hand side with Claude, I had to open these up, right? They were hidden. You couldn't even see the citations. So I had to expand them just to be able to see them. But the real utility of the citations is so that you can reverse, that's not why they're doing it, but I'm saying for my purposes and as an SEO, we can see the citations that are being used, and we can then go and look at those and see, are we being mentioned in these citations, right? That's the idea. So we're getting kind of the intel that we need, and we can see, okay, they're on, they went to Justia, they went to Super Lawyers, they went to Find Law, and they also went to this KM Law SC or whatever it is. Oh, and then there's Yelp. Okay. So like 80% of these citations that are used, we can also get listed there. So there's no reason that we shouldn't just look at this as opportunity to show up in the same spots that our top competitors are. It is actually that simple. Okay. All right. Now, this is very important because I showed why Steinberg is doing so well for a couple of reasons. Obviously, great reviews, great reputation, but there's something that's really fascinating. So I went and looked at their whole link profile and I categorized every single backlink that they have by the type of backlink that it is. Okay. And as you can see, there's a lot of very important things here. Number one, editorial links. These are basically any national based link, which would be like getting a link on Huffington Post or Forbes or something like that. They don't have a lot of those. Okay. There's not a ton of those in their link profile, but they have a lot of localized links, about 13%. And those localized links, they range. It's sponsorships, scholarships, and then some other stuff sprinkled in there. Okay. So those are important. We should clearly be pursuing those localized links. But of course, it's a smaller pool of opportunities, but you should absolutely be trying to get as many localized links as you possibly can. Okay. And then we obviously have the directories. Directories, as I showed here, are very important. We can see all the directories that are being referenced to ultimately generate this response. Okay. So we need to be in those directories, and we also want to be trying to get reviews on those directories to get that review diversity. This is very important for the AI platforms. They do not just rely on Google reviews. They're looking across the board. So they're going to pull every directory and they're going to basically bring those all into one place and say, okay, Steinberg has reviews on Google and Yelp and Justia, and they bring that all together. And that's how it's able to understand that, Steinberg is something that's worth recommending in their generated response. Okay. So very simply, we should be on every directory that our competitors on, and we should be trying to drive reviews on other directories and other platforms other than just Google. Google's number one, like hands down, not even close, but we also need that diversity as well if we really want to influence these platforms. And then the thing that's kind of crazy is the press releases. Okay. They do a ton of press releases, this particular brand, and they're all they have a lot of positive sentiment about their brand. Okay. Now, these press releases are published on third-party platforms. This is not what they're saying about themselves on their own website. This is what they're putting out into the ether, onto the internet, to ultimately market their law firm, right? And of course, when you control the press release, you can control the narrative and you can create positive sentiment around your brand. Okay. So the reason why this works, in my opinion, is not because of the link that you score from a press release. In fact, the link probably has very, very little value. What matters is that it creates this very interesting environment where you're getting positive sentiment. Okay. So like, for example, these are all the templates I pulled from various, headlines that they use, but like, Steinberg Law Firm recognized as best personal injury law firm. Okay. So someone gave them an award. They put out a press release and distributed that idea out there as much as possible, right? Very smart. Okay. Next one here is about just news about the brand. Now, this is very important. A Steinberg Law Firm opens up new office in Goose Creek, South Carolina. Okay. This is very important because it trains the AI platforms when they're actually using training data and they're coming out with their new version. It's creating information that helps the AI understand more about this entity. And I'll show you how you can audit your entity information inside of ChatGPT here in a second. But this is very important. You should be feeding these platforms and feeding Google and all the other platforms trying to influence as much as possible about your brand. Okay, you can control the narrative. Okay. Press releases are actually really useful for that, apparently. Another one here, just another kind of little update about their firm. And then this one here, results. Okay. Results. So this is once again, just kind of proving that this controlling the sentiment and the freshness of that's kind of swirling around the brand is really, really important, and ultimately trying to trying to create accuracy around the brand. Okay. So important. I cannot stress this enough. All right. So it's not about the link. It's likely about what's being distributed that's influencing the platforms. Okay. So let me quickly show you something you can do. This is a little tool that I built inside of ChatGPT. Okay. And it's very simple. It's a free GPT. You just go into ChatGPT and just search Geo brand audit. Okay. And you'll find it. And this is really important because what it's going to do is I've set it up so that it only pulls from ChatGPT's training data. So this is not going to, it will not go and search the internet and bring in live information to enhance the response. It's purely based on the information that was at the cutoff date. Okay. And specifically 4.0, which is their most popular model. It's also their oldest model, I believe, right now. So the reason you want to do this is because you want to see ultimately, what does the AI know about us? And you can do this across all platforms, but ChatGPT is the most popular, so you should probably start there. So it's very simple. We're just going to go in here and we can just run actually the same exact one we've been talking about, which is Steinberg. Make sure I get the right brand in here. So Steinberg Law Firm is the exact name. And typically, if it's local, I might add just like a little local modifier. So Steinberg Law Firm in, we'll just say Charleston, SC. Okay, so this just kind of makes it a little more specific. I think it's pretty important, especially when you're working with local businesses where they don't have a lot of brand recognition. Okay, so you run that through and it's going to measure the overall brand knowledge of this particular entity. Okay, so you can see what we're trying to look for is consistency. And ultimately, we're trying to make sure that this is all relevant stuff to what this brand actually does. Now, obviously a little executive summary here, but really what we're looking at is like core brand knowledge. So, what is the core focus of what they do? And then the one that I add in here that's really important is also the entity association. Okay. So this is basically that the platforms know what this brand actually does. Okay. And I'll show you an example of, a gap that's not good, which is like our software. Okay. But you can see, you can use this completely free. And I think there's like 25 questions that are run through this GPT that helps it generate these results. Okay. So keep in mind, there's also some checks in here to prevent hallucinations as well. So this should be pretty accurate. Okay. Should be pretty accurate. And plus it's free. So if you see any bugs with it, let me know. But for the most part, we've run a lot of tests and it works really, really well. And it just gives you a nice baseline for you can use this and say, okay, we've got some issues here with inaccuracy. We've got some issues with how our brand is being associated with various topics. You get the point, okay? But if we run like, let's say rankability, which rankability was very new when the last cutoff date for 4.0 was. So there's almost no training information about our brand because we hadn't launched really yet at all. And if we run this, you'll see it's going to be wrong. It's saying, we're a digital marketing service that, does SEO auditing, and it's just not right. Okay. This whole thing is completely wrong, essentially. Okay. So this is an example of like, we've been doing a lot of work since that point, but it's still very, very off. And so the goal here is like, if it's off right now, you have to start working really, really hard so that then, you can only be in this training data and that the AI is going to know more about your brand. Okay. All right. So now let's move on to the geeky technical stuff here about the website that we're working on. So I went and ran a crawl on Screaming Frog, and basically right away I noticed a few challenges. Okay. And I'll show you kind of what this looks like. So we're going to sort by color. And unfortunately, I don't know if this website went through a migration or something, but they've got a problem. Okay. And the first problem, it's actually a really simple problem to solve, but it is a big problem, which is you can see that they're not using the subdomain, which is the www version of their domain. And then here they are. Okay. Now the problem with this is you only need to have one preferred version of your website. And typically whatever that preferred version is, all other variants get 3.1 redirected to the preferred version. So in this case, we've actually got both versions that are being indexed in Google. So go to the detailed Chrome extension. You can see there is no canonical setup. There is no redirect setup, obviously, and redirection is the correct move here, by the way. And you can see they're both available, both versions. Okay, and you can see that. So this is a serious technical issue that needs to be resolved, and it will cause a lot of problems. And so first thing is figuring out what is the preferred version of the domain. Then you go and you 3.1 redirect the non-preferred to the preferred, and that fixes the problem. And if you do that, essentially you'll eliminate 26 pages that are creating basically duplicate content across the site when it's completely unnecessary. Okay. So that's the first thing, is just like clean that up, and that's going to give some quick wins right away. All right. Next thing I want to look at is on the topic authority level. So we know that they're going after Goose Creek. And so first thing we can do is look at the competitor, just run this quick site colon search and then put Goose Creek in quotes. And this is what I typically do just to get a kind of high level overview of like how many pages do they have targeting this location essentially. Okay. And you can also, by the way, if you want to get tricky, you can actually run your competitor through Screaming Frog and then export their whole sitemap. And then you can get a really good idea of like, okay, they've got 40 pages about Goose Creek and personal injury, essentially. That can give you a baseline for what you should do. Okay. That's a little bit more advanced, but if you want to get a high level review, you can just do this. You can say, okay, they've got at least 10 pages. All right. And then you just compare that to yours. Right. And we look at this. There's some problems going on here because, like I said, I don't know if they just went through some sort of migration, but the way they had this set up was actually correct. They had the core service offering and the core location and a dedicated page specifically for it. But for whatever reason, when we go to this, it redirects to the homepage now. And this can be very problematic because now we're sending irrelevant pages and signals back to the homepage when we want these signals to be hyper-focused and these pages to be hyper-focused on one topic, right? And so I would try to roll this back out so that these pages still exist, because this is going to be way more effective for ranking. So, obviously this is not my client, by the way. So I don't even know if they're going to see this. This is more just for demonstration purposes, but this is not the right move. And it's going to cause some lack of performance. Okay. It actually was set up correctly. So that's a part on the topical authority. Now let's talk about the architecture. So this is what I'm calling an architecture upgrade. So you can see here when we look at this, look at the title and the meta description, we can see that there's a lot of duplication. It's not actually very relevant. Like they don't even mention Goose Creek in a lot of places. And it's got this kind of old school, 2012 type of setup. So this is not, you don't need to do this, and it just doesn't really work. And then on top of it, the meta description, there's tons of duplication. So the good news is that, AI can make this a lot faster. And so basically I'll show you what I did. All right. So we can see here with the architecture upgrade, what you want to do is first get the practice areas in place. This could be, if you're an HVAC, these would be your service offerings. Okay. Essentially. So you put those in place. Those are your broad categories, and then your core location that you're trying to go after. That's it. That's all you have to do. Now we're going to look at the old URLs, and we're going to see they've got that, .php. We want to get rid of that. And then just have nice, clean URLs. So funny enough, this isn't necessarily the way that I would personally structure URLs, but I let the AI do it, and it's fine. Like you could run this. The key to having a good URL structure is like only one objective. You want to have the core topic in it, and you want to have the location. This is, if you're doing local, you got to have both. And you'll see some brands that they'll just have / wrongful death. That's fine. But the thing is, imagine you're a bot and you took away any context and all you saw was wrongful death. Well, that's not exactly super helpful, right? So you want to try to make it as clean and as natural as possible. And based on what I'm seeing here, like if you remove the root domain and I saw SC, Goose Creek, and wrongful death, those three entities together, it would be easy to kind of conclude this is likely a lawyer. Okay. You could certainly come to that conclusion very quickly, as opposed to just having / Goose Creek, right? That's not enough context. So the URL creates context, creates relevance. And so this is actually a fine structure. I typically like to go right off the root. It doesn't matter. All that matters is you get the core topics in the URL, and you can slice and dice it however you want. Okay. And then we look at the old title. Not exactly a great setup. I'll go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. Not exactly a great setup, but then this is what the AI produced for us, was Goose Creek SC. This is, I don't really like this format personally, but once again, I wanted to show you raw AI stuff. I would probably make it more natural, which would probably be construction accident lawyer in Goose Creek SC. Okay. Keep it kind of a natural language a little bit. But once again, this can work. This absolutely can work because we still have the core location and the core topic. So Meta description, same thing, old meta. Now we've got unique meta descriptions. Okay. Completely unique, good to go. All right. And so how did I do this? Very easily. ChatGPT, go in here and you just say something very simple like this. I need you to revise the URL structure, title, meta description to maximize SEO performance, and please put it in a table. So then I just slap it in there. Okay. And you can pick whatever you model. For this one, I did O4 mini. But you'll see within a few seconds, already optimized it pretty well. Okay. I'd say this is like a solid 8 out of 10. Okay. Not perfect, but can get the job done, right? This can get the job done and you don't need to overthink this. Okay. So once again, very simple way to kind of clean this up. And honestly, at this point, there's just no good reason to have duplicate meta descriptions because ChatGPT or AI can just easily make them slightly unique. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do is now that we've got the architecture all squared away, we want to go and start looking page by page and looking at the relevance and the quality of those pages. Now, of course, I'm very biased here, but I use Rankability to do this. Okay, so very simply, I ran their most important page through Rankability, specifically for personal injury lawyer in Goose Creek, and I wanted to see how well it was optimized, and it was not. Okay, so they're missing out on a lot of core topics that their competitors are talking about. Okay, so for example, when we look at this, like they're not talking about dog bite. All right, and we go over here at examples, and we can see that almost all of their competitors are talking about dog bites. Go over here, almost all of their competitors are talking about truck accidents. Okay. And so on and so forth. So these are not just for SEO purposes. This is also for business gaps. Okay. And more than likely they do this, like they actually do truck accidents and slip and fall and all of those things. But the problem is they're not really talking about it in the way that they should. And so these are gaps in relevance that they need to narrow. So what I would do, let's just say this was my client, I wouldn't try to like look at this and like take one top and try to like inject it in here and like go back and forth. I think that's just not a good idea. Sometimes it's better just to kind of build from scratch. So let me walk you through how I would actually go about this. So the first thing I would do is I would go into Claude or any AI platform that you prefer. And here's what I will do. I'll use this very simple prompt. So essentially create an AI content prompt for Rankability's AI writer for the keyword. And then I'll put in the seed that matches the intent. In this case, it would be commercial intent and is positioned to sell this business type products or services. So this would be personal injury services. Okay. It should be no more than 6,000 characters. That's because the prompt window inside of Rankability is 6,000 character max. And just some other details that it tends to do when it comes to Claude. Okay. And then the most important part is right here. Okay. So some context. So you want to go to that law firm, which is what I did. I went to the law firm. I looked at their about page and I grabbed a bunch of information about their brand. Okay. And this is really important when you're generating AI, when you're using AI to generate commercial based content. You want it to be highly relevant to the brand because you're trying to actually sell some stuff. So it can't just be generic, AI junk that gets spit out. You want to make sure it's highly relevant. Okay. So that's what you do. Then you'll see that it will generate this nice little, AI content brief. You copy this AI content brief and then you just go into Rankability. And the way this works in Rankability is you actually enter the keyword in the content optimizer. And when you click run optimizer, it just gives you the choice. You can do it manually or you can use the AI to create the first draft for you. Okay. So this is in the case of running AI. And you can see I just pick service page and I put all of that Claude generated context inside of this context window. Okay. And then it's going to go and produce this content and it will consider this context here in the context window. And it will also, what happens is we actually go and crawl the top ranking results and extract the relevant topics. And so this draft is created based on what your competitors are actually talking about. Okay. And so you can see here, this is the first draft that it produced. And you can see right away the score, if we look at the original one, which was 14, very little coverage on the core topics. This one here is extreme coverage across all the core topics. Okay. And you can see that this particular, asset is not, this is one thing that makes our AI generation unique is that it doesn't just spit out informational content. It understands the intent. So the intent here is commercial. And so the intent is to sell. Okay. So you can see that is how this is actually structured. It's built to sell. And this is the advantage to using, in particular, like I said, I'm very biased, but I'm very proud of what we build because it keeps that relevance tight and it matches the intent. That's always been my dream, is to have an AI, content tool that actually matches intent. And so that's what this does. And on top of it, it automatically optimizes the content, puts in all the appropriate entities and relevance. And so it's pretty cool. And now keep in mind, this is a first draft. Treat it like a first draft. If you're going to, I would not just take this and slap it on your website. Okay. I would have a human come in here and run some human edits through it, make it relevant, do what you need to do, and then push it live to the site. Typically for us, most AI content is going to go through 3 to 4 rounds of edits before it goes live on the site. Okay. But this, as you can imagine, if you're building out, if we go back and look at the architecture that we were building, you can see in the architecture, we actually have to build 15 pages. Okay. So imagine having to write 15 unique assets. And truthfully, for these commercial pages, I've created an ungodly amount of AI content, even before ChatGPT came out. And I can tell you now, the difference for commercial pages, like for a human writer versus AI, is pretty negligible at this point. Okay. If you use a good prompt, use a good tool, like I just showed you, it's going to do the job. Most people using Rankability, a lot of them on the local level are pretty much doing it for commercial pages, because it is so effective at doing that. Okay. So that is just a very high level overview of what you can do to perform well, not just in the local pack, but also perform well in Google's traditional results, but also more importantly in the AI platforms. There is so much more that you can do that I am just scratching the surface today. And I don't want this video to be 7 hours long, but there's some good news. I actually created a checklist. So this checklist here, this is version 1.0, and the next version, actually probably, by the time you're seeing this video, I'll probably have already upgraded this to the next version because I'm going to be adding like tools and various things in here. But essentially, this checklist can walk you through all the core things that are likely to influence the AI platforms. I've already gotten some feedback here that people want to know like what matters the most. So there's going to be some new things added to this, which is like the impact of that action or the likelihood that it's going to influence AI or even, Google, for example. One thing you're going to notice is like, and you've probably heard this before, that like some people say that geo is just SEO. They're not wrong per se, because yes, you need to do SEO. Like SEO, the traditional way to rank in the traditional SERPs, is still critical. You should keep doing it. Keep doing everything you're already doing. And what you're going to find is a lot of this stuff in here is still classic SEO. Okay. Just good SEO. But there are some things that are new. Okay. And the things that are new is what I'm calling like the extra 20% of things that you need to be doing. And when we look at this, we'll go down here. I would say most of the first party signals are pretty, like I'd say like 99% of the first party signals are standard SEO. Okay. You'll see that. A couple new things in here, but nothing really that different. What's different is when we get down here to the third party signals. Okay. And so this is where things get very, very different. And, just to give you some perspective, I have been able to rank all kinds of pages that don't have any brand, don't have reviews, whatever it is. And I've been able to rank them for the last decade. Never once needed reviews for the brands that we're trying to rank. And reviews have never influenced traditional search results. They influence the local pack, but traditional, it didn't really matter. Now it does. Okay. And not for traditional, but it matters for rank or for appearing in the AI generated results. Okay. So reviews are critical. And you can see I've got a whole block. There's a reason why it's the first block, because it is so important. Listicles are huge. Okay. Once again, getting links on listicles has always been a common link building strategy. That's not anything new. But what's new is that you actually don't even need a link in the listicle to get the benefit. Okay, so that's what's different. Obviously, get a link if you can. It's going to be much more beneficial. But even just getting a brand mention in that listicle on a website that's highly trusted also can influence these platforms quite well. Okay. And then so on and so forth. There's a bunch of other ones. Obviously, UGC. I'm really just giving you a bunch of opportunities that you can think about. But the point is there's some new variables that we need to be thinking about And the good news is this checklist is free. So you just have to go to, there'll be a link below the video in the pinned description. You can go enter your email, get access to this free checklist. Oh, and make sure you save this checklist because all the updates that I'm going to do are going to be on this checklist here. So I'm just going to add, every version will just be this one checklist. Okay. So every new update, I'll keep you posted when I do a big update, but this is like an ongoing project as I discover more things that tend to influence. Like I said, it's probably 80% classic SEO right now that does the influencing. The other 20% is the stuff that's a little bit newer, the unlinked brand mentions, the sentiment, and all the other stuff I showed you in this video. So hope that helps. Once again, link will be below the video, and thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it.